Welcome to the eShopper Reviews Podcast, episode 25. This is the podcast for April 2023, and I'm Jenn Ip.
And I'm Jake McNeil.
For those new to this podcast, eShopper Reviews is a subreddit on reddit.com where Jake reviews games on the Nintendo Switch platform, and you can find this subreddit at the URL reddit.com/r/eShopperReviews. We currently have over 2,100 reviews and counting, and we are supported by your donations on our Patreon, which you can find at patreon.com/eShopperReviews. This month's sponsors are Ben, Andy Miller, Xlane, Homer Simpin, Johannes, Talisa, Eli Goodman, Gabriel Coronado Medina, Ilya Zarev, Christopher Wolf, and Seth Christianfield. Thank you all for helping to keep the reviews coming. Now on to the patron-voted games. We'll start with the all-patron budget vote.
Okay.
Which is falling. What is up with these titles that are so long?
You know, I think that maybe some of these companies that put out the budget titles think that they might get more attention the longer their title is, so they put as many words in there. Or maybe it's like a search engine thing. Maybe it's, we want this to get hit by as many search engines as possible.
So, it is Falling Elevator Hyper Casual Demolish Escape Survival Game.
Yep. So that's a thing.
And then our standard vote is Mega Man Battle Network Collection.
I was really super pleased when this got announced for Nintendo Switch, because number one, it saved me the trouble of having to buy it for Wii U, because I was doing all the Wii U Virtual Console reviews. Mm-hmm. And it's, I want to say it's like 5 or 6 different games, but also there's multiple versions of some of the later games. They did like a Pokemon Red, Pokemon Blue kind of thing for some of them. And there's features that are like supposed to cross over and stuff. And I played the original Mega Man Battle Network back on the Game Boy Advance when it first came out, and I really liked it. But it's been years since I played anything in this series, so I'm looking forward to getting back into it. It's been a while since I've played these games. I'm excited. I'm happy.
So, shall we talk about next month's vote?
Yes.
All right. So next month we have Little Gator Game, Melatonin, Soph Star, Super Mega Zero, The Spirit and the Mouse, and Wayward Strand.
So with this month's vote, I went back to 2022 again, and I looked at more games that were fairly well acclaimed or got good reviews, but that I never had in any previous votes. Not through all of 2022. I guess these games kind of flew under my radar, or maybe they only got the reviews later in the year, or maybe even this year people reviewed them late. And that's no reason for a good game to go, unnoticed or unplayed. So I felt like it would be a good opportunity to give all of these games their shot. And granted, none of these are super huge titles. I imagine if you're anything like me, probably this is the first time you've heard of any of these games. But supposedly they're all really good, and I figure now's a good chance to go back and give one of them an extra spotlight. And I'm giving you guys that opportunity. This is for patrons who donate $5 or more. You can go ahead and vote for one of these, and I will give it a review next month.
The all-patron budget vote game includes Row, Inquiry for Justice, Self Guns Base, Tama Cannon, Stack Tower Up 3D Builder Simulator Don't Crash, and Animal Supercraft Maker World Simulator Deluxe Game 2023.
Yeah, got more of those games with the super long titles.
Yeah.
I didn't check specifically, but I get the feeling they're probably put out by the same publisher, and I'm not sure if it's like an English as a second language thing, or if it's very, like I said literally earlier, trying to game the search engines and make sure they get as many hits as possible. But these are all budget games, as in $2 or under, that have released sometime so far in 2023, and none of these I've had for a vote yet. So all of the games that are up for votes this month are games that have never been in any of the previous votes. And all of these games, the budget games, those can be voted on by anyone who has donated $1 or more. So as long as you donate to the Patreon, you can vote in this vote. If you donate $5 or more, you can vote in either of the two votes, or both of the two votes if you choose.
All right, so let's talk about the highlights that eShopper Reviews covered in the month of March 2023. And as always, these are not necessarily games released in the last month, but games reviewed in that month. And we'll start by talking about the best games.
Oh, this is unusual for you, actually starting with the best, working our way down, huh?
Yep.
All right.
So you have 3 in this. Wait, 1, 2, 3.
Nope,
Yeah,
4.
4. I can count. The first one is Lego Star Wars: The Skywalker Saga.
So we're going to be talking a lot about Lego games in this podcast because I spent 1 week, or 5 days, I should say, in March reviewing every single Lego game that I've not previously reviewed that is on the Nintendo Switch, Wii U, and Nintendo 3DS. I played a ton of Lego games. And while most of the Lego games are good, man, I got sick of them. They're mostly really good games, but in a lot of ways, it's kind of a lot of the same thing over and over again. However, Lego Star Wars: The Skywalker Saga is my pick for the best out of all of them. It is, in my opinion, the best Lego game that has ever been made. This game, in many ways, is very typical of the Traveler's Tales formula. You know, you have the standard family-friendly, easy to pick up, easy to put down. It has co-op. It's kind of a little action platformer, 3D sort of thing. Kind of all predictable, but what really makes this special is a number of things. First of all, they add in a new element here, which seems like it wouldn't be a big deal, and that is making it a third-person shooter as well as an action platformer. But this kind of changes everything, because making it an over-the-shoulder third-person shooter actually brings you down into the action in this game in a way that you've never really done in prior Lego games. And it makes it a whole different experience. It makes everything feel new again. And on top of that, they hit everything else pretty much right here. The world looks great. It has some of the best graphics that the Lego games have ever had. The sense of humor is wonderful. And there's obviously a really great homage to the Star Wars franchise going throughout all of it. This game focuses primarily on all of the numbered Star Wars movies. And you can get DLC for other Star Wars content, like, you know, some of the other movies that haven't been numbered. I think there's one for Book of Boba Fett and one for Mandalorian. But long story short, this is my pick for the best Lego game ever, and it may very well be the best Star Wars game ever. I don't know about that last claim because there have been a lot of Star Wars games over the years, but this one is definitely in the running for that title. It is extremely good. I cannot recommend it enough.
Okay, so in the spirit of talking about more Lego games,
yes,
the next one in the best games category is Lego City Undercover.
When it comes to talking about the best Lego games, while I still believe that Lego Star Wars: The Skywalker Saga is the best, Lego City Undercover comes pretty darn close. And this one, it isn't based on any movie license or any comic book license or anything like that. Rather, this is a game that is just using Lego's own original characters, and the easy way to describe it would be picture Grand Theft Auto, but with Lego. And I know that might bring up a silly kind of idea in your head, but that's actually a formula that makes a lot of sense when you think about it. Making a kind of more family-friendly Grand Theft Auto style game is not anything that's new. A lot of people still to this day love The Simpsons Hit and Run because it did basically that. It was kind of a more family-friendly Grand Theft Auto. And with this game, it maintains the great sense of humor that Lego is known for. It maintains that same kind of action platformer gameplay. Now you have a really nice open world to explore with all kinds of secrets hidden around the place. And Lego frequently does open world games, but I feel like this one did open world the best, better than any of the others. I I think I would say even better than the Skywalker Saga. If you're looking for an open world Lego game, I would probably point you to Lego City Undercover.
Next up is a game that you and I both enjoyed,
Yes.
Inscription.
Oh man, so we've got to be careful talking about this one because we do not want to spoil it because there is
Mm-hmm.
all kinds of interesting stuff that happens in this game. The short version is this is a card game and roguelike, but it also has some graphic adventure elements. And it starts with the simple premise of you're playing a card game across from this shadowy figure with kind of crazy eyes who's kind of implicitly threatening. And your card game plays like you're putting down little woodland creatures and stuff, and you are performing blood sacrifices or bone sacrifices of those creatures to get stronger creatures out.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a really well made card game, but it doesn't just stay with the card game. You actually get up from the table, you're moving around the cabin that you're trapped in, fiddling with the little objects in the cabin, trying to figure out just what's going on here. And then there's this whole meta story above that, where right from the start of the game, you are not able to pick a new game. You can't. It's grayed out and you have to continue an old save. And you're hearing the comments of a guy who is playing the game and you're kind of seeing things through his eyes. Again, I hesitate to go into any more detail for fear of spoilers, but suffice it to say, it goes into some of that postmodernist stuff that we were talking about in, I think, last month's podcast.
Yes, it reminds me a lot of There Is No Game, but a completely different tone.
So, the game that I think this is going to remind most people of is going to be Slay the Spire, which was also a card game and roguelike. And well, I think I preferred the card game in that a bit more over Inscription. Inscription has all these extra elements that I've been talking about. And what I feel like it does really well, even beyond it, has an excellent card game and the graphic adventure elements are really interesting. But what it does, even better than that, I think, is setting an ominous tone.
Mm-hmm.
There's just a really amazing, threatening tone that you get from the moment you start this game. Like you have started something that is cursed. Almost like you popped in that videotape from The Ring. No, that's not spoiling. I feel like you get a bit of that right from the start.
Okay, yeah, that's fair. Okay. Anyway, off to the next one.
No. Not off to the next one, because you actually have stuff to say about this. You clearly have strong opinions. I want to hear what you have to say about this.
Okay.
Jen.
I'm not normally a person who likes card games. And I grew up on card games. I played Yu-Gi-Oh! I collected Pokemon cards. I even tried to learn Magic the Gathering and failed miserably. But I really liked Inscription. So if you're someone like me, who maybe is a little bit cautious about card games, give this one a try. You might like it.
Well, give this one a try with the warning that if you are squeamish about violence or scary themes, that kind of stuff,
it wasn't too bad.
I would say be aware that there are definitely dark and violent undertones in this game. I wouldn't say there's much in the way of gore or anything like that, but there's definitely a lot of implied violence there.
Mm-hmm. All right, so the last one for this category is Pinball FX3.
So another genre that I did a lot of reviews for in this month was pinball games. And I reviewed all of the major free-to-play, or free-to-start if you prefer, pinball games on the Nintendo Switch. And out of all of them, Pinball FX3 is easily the best. One of the things that it does that's really great is you have both real-life tables, realistic stuff that you could theoretically still run into if you went to a place that has an actual pinball table. But they also have fantasy tables in the game where it has all kinds of little fantastical elements, moving characters and stuff, magic spells or whatever, that couldn't really exist in real life, although they almost make it maybe almost plausible that it could be in a real pinball table, but not really. And so a lot of the free to play, free to start, whatever pinball games have a lot of good tables that you can purchase, and this is one of them. This one, I believe, also has the best free table right from the start. It has a free table called Sorcerer's Lair, it's really well designed, I feel. It has some interesting elements to it. It has some slightly annoying elements to it as well, but overall, out of all of the free pinball tables from the free-to-play games, this is the one that I enjoyed the most. And if you are listening to this, whether you like pinball, maybe not super into it, whatever, I still highly recommend you to get Pinball FX3 because it is absolutely free to get the game, and it comes with this one. Actually, technically, it comes with two tables, but the other one is kind of meh. But it comes with both of these two tables, and one of them is really good, and it won't cost you a dime. So definitely give it a shot.
Can you believe that there are now generations that have never played with an actual pinball machine?
I mean, they still exist.
Oh, well, yeah. No doubt about it. But the
that
likelihood...
kind of gets to how many young people these days have ever been in a video game arcade.
Either way, like, I saw you play this game and I thought, that actually really mimics an actual pinball machine really well.
Oh yeah,
it does.
And I think a lot of the free to start pinball games do a good job of that, but I feel like this one goes above and beyond.
All right, next category is worst games.
All right.
Guess the word.
Okay, so I have to start by saying, if a game is intended for young children, as this game is, I try not to judge it as if it was meant for adults. Obviously, this game was not meant for adults, and to judge it as if it was would not be fair to this game. However, even a game made for young children, I feel should live up to at least a bare minimum of standards. And I feel like Guess the Word completely fails to do even that much. For starters, if you are a parent listening to this podcast, know that if you get this game for your child, you will want to get earplugs along with it.
Ooh.
Because hearing a character annoyingly repeating, yeah, and great, to everything you say, or everything you do in the game over and over again. Yeah, great. Yeah, great. Yeah, great. Yeah. If you're annoyed now, just imagine how annoyed you'll be after your kid is playing this game for a half an hour. However, it's not just that. This game doesn't have a fail state, which, again, in and of itself isn't necessarily a bad thing. But if the whole point is wanting to have your kids learn the correct answers, there's a timer in the game, but there's no penalty for, guessing after the timer is up. It doesn't keep score, so it's not like you can try to track your progress and improve. I've played tons of educational games over the years, and even if you're getting an educational game for a young child, I assume that the ideal is that you want them to be able to learn something from it. And I cannot imagine this game being a useful tool in that regard.
All right. So the next one in the worst games, which I'm actually quite surprised.
Really?
Yeah. Lego Brawls.
When a lot of people first saw this, they thought this was a Lego alternative to Super Smash Brothers.
Okay.
And it doesn't really play like that. It is a multiplayer-focused, arena-based action platformer, but your character's movesets are very limited. There is a focus on getting like special weapons and stuff, but you can customize your own character, create and customize your own character, but none of the customizations you do seem to really affect your character's abilities or anything like that. Everyone seems to be pretty much identical, which isn't necessarily a deal breaker, but none of the abilities, none of the combat in this game is actually fun. You don't get any sort of visceral feel when you attack someone like you've actually connected with a hit. It just feels detached. And to have this detached feeling in a game that's supposed to be kind of a party sort of game, and yeah, just not fun. And the more that I played this, the more I was just like, I feel like I'm wasting my time with this. It just doesn't feel like I'm getting anything out of it.
That's a shame. All right, next one is the Lego Movie 2 video game.
So when I was reviewing all of the Lego games this month, I knew that the Lego Movie 2 video game was generally one of the worst reviewed games in the Lego franchise in recent history, in any case. But I always just put this down to, it's probably just, fatigue. People are sick of the Lego games. And let me tell you, that is not the problem with this game.
Ooh.
First of all, this is another game in that Traveler's Tales style of Lego game. It is a lot like those. The first problem you notice almost immediately when starting is the movement in this game feels all kinds of wrong. It feels like almost swimming in molasses to try to get your character to start moving in this game. And it's... none of the vehicles have any sense of speed. Everything feels sluggish and slow, and like it's just difficult to move around and do anything. But the real thing that had me just disgusted with this game. So, I love the Lego movies, both of them. I like the first one a bit better, but the second one I think is good too. And one of the things that I think is great about both of the Lego movies is they have an incredible sense of humor. And one of the things that's generally great about Lego video games is they have a great sense of humor. And the Lego Movie 2 video game was the most bland and uninteresting, uninspired, like, go here and do this. Hey, do you think you can go here and do that? Oh, hey, I left this over here. Can you go? And there was no humor behind it. There was no funny. There was no personality to it. It was really sad. And for such a vibrant movie, for a video game based on that to come across as so lifeless, just, again, it disgusted me. I was really frustrated with how bad this game was.
All right. Let's move on to the Hidden Gems.
Yes.
Which consists of a lot of Lego games. Who'd have thought?
Yeah, I played a lot of Lego games.
The first one is Lego DC Villains.
So, I feel like by the time this game came out, people were kind of bouncing off of the Lego Batman games, and this is the fourth game that's kind of in that same franchise of Lego Batman. And for people who did bounce off of it at that point, and I can totally understand that because Lego Batman 3 was kind of a step in the wrong direction, Lego DC Villains is fantastic. First of all, it made way better use of the DC license than any of the prior games, and this is in part because they got it's seemingly as many voice actors from the DC animated universe as possible. You have Mark Hamill doing Joker. You have the late Kevin Conroy doing Batman. You have all these great voice actors, all these great references to the franchise. But on top of that, you have a really great perspective in the game because you are playing the role of a villain. And on top of that, they have this really great character creation system where you are basically rebuilding your character as you progress through the game, and you gain access to more and more abilities because your character's powers, they have this ability to sap up energy and power up new superpowers. So the previous superhero game in the franchise, Lego The Incredibles, had a character builder too, but this one incorporates that into the story and makes it a lot more malleable in ways that are really interesting. And there are some more mechanics here too, like characters like the Joker can command their minions to do things. There's just a lot of great creativity that went into this game and a lot of love that went into the license. So yeah, I feel like if you're a fan of anything like DC superhero or a fan of the Lego stuff, this is definitely a must-have game.
Next is the Lego Ninjago movie.
This is one that I really was not expecting to like anywhere near as much as I did. I liked the Lego Ninjago movie, but I didn't love it. Given how the Traveler's Tales folks didn't really seem to put too much effort into the personality of the Lego movie games, I felt like this was going to be more along those same lines, and it really wasn't. They actually did put a lot of effort into building the personality of this game, and they built up the combat, so the combat system is really interesting. And there are a lot of mechanics that they added in this game that then you see a lot more of these later in the series. And this is one of the few games in the Lego series that's also 4 players. So if you want to get 4 friends, well, yourself and 3 friends, to join in and beat up a bunch of Lego enemies and stuff, this game is surprisingly fun. I think this is one of the more underrated games in the Traveler's Tales pantheon, if you can call it that.
Oh, okay. Lego Builder's Journey.
So Lego Builder's Journey is one of 2 puzzle games I have listed here. And again, I feel like by a certain point, people stopped paying attention to Lego games. And these 2 puzzle games came out, and they have nothing to do with all of the other Lego Traveler's Tales games. They're not Traveler's Tales games at all. These are completely separate. Builder's Journey is a very Zen-like game. It's told with minimal instruction, minimal text, and you're kind of supposed to extrapolate based on just these pieces that represent things. And from what it appears, it looks like you are trying to build a path from a child to an adult using Lego pieces. And it kind of establishes how these pieces work, and you slot them into places in the environment. And it becomes really increasingly difficult, but also increasingly clever as things move on. I thought it was a really good use of the Lego license. It was a really unique use of the Lego figurines themselves because they don't actually use any of the typical minifig figurines in this. Your characters are just represented by a few normal Lego blocks, which I think is a really different and inspired way to do things. And overall, really great atmosphere, good kind of puzzle gameplay, and an inspired use of just Legos overall.
Lego Brick Tales.
So the second of the Lego puzzle games here, kind of a little bit different, but also some similarities. The main premise here is you have a bunch of self-contained levels where you are literally just building structures. You could be building a bridge from point A to point B, or you could be building a pillar to support a structure, or you could be building a statue to imitate another statue. You're given specific criteria that you need to fill, like if you're building a bridge, it needs to be structurally sound. If you're building, a statue, it needs to look identical to the other one, that kind of thing. And I felt like, again, this is a really good use of the Lego license that's different than a lot of the other stuff that we've seen. And it, unlike a lot of these other games that we've been talking about, it really gives players a lot of opportunity for creativity to kind of put your own spin on things, which is kind of one of those things you would expect from a Lego game, given that's a lot of what Lego is about. So yeah, definitely a good one to go for.
Steve Jackson's Sorcery.
Steve Jackson's Sorcery was one of the patron-sponsored games for this last month. This was the main vote, the $5 vote. And I was kind of surprised because this isn't a game that really sounded too familiar to me, but it was one of the bigger games of, I think, 2022 that I missed. But I'm glad that it got recommended because it is really good. This is, I want to say, picture a choose-your-own-adventure book mixed with like a tabletop RPG, where as you're going through the choose-your-own-adventure book, your character has stats and they have an inventory, and they, maybe you got this item back here and you can choose to use it here. It also has this kind of creative magic system based on magic words that you can fit together. The magic system is a bit convoluted, but overall, I think there's a lot of creativity going here, and it makes for a style of game that's pretty unique. And this is all within a very well-told adventure. If you like, again, choose your own adventure kind of stuff, or if you like tabletop RPGs, but more specifically the kind of setting and the kind of atmosphere of tabletop RPGs, this is definitely a great game to go for along those lines.
Other noteworthy reviews include Snowboarding: The Next Phase.
This was another one of the patron voted games for last month. This was one of the budget games. And it didn't used to be a budget game. I think it originally came out at $10, but then got reduced in price. I really wanted to like this game better than I did. It has a lot going for it, but it is just too limited in its scope and its structure. It has very short levels. Like, you'll be done with a level within a minute.
Ooh.
And the gameplay within those levels is fine. I think there could be some improvement made, but it's not bad. It's just you're over almost as soon as you're done, as you started. And you have goals within each level that you need to try and aim for. Point goals, or perform this specific trick, or hit these specific icons, that kind of thing. It's certainly not bad. And if you're looking for a fully 3D snowboarding game on Nintendo Switch, you really don't have many options, and this one is okay, but it's not great. And I feel like with more work and with a wider scope, it could have built up to something great, but it's just too limited to really get there.
Next up is the original mobile games.
This is another of the budget vote games from last month. I reviewed 2 of them because there was a tie, and while I don't feel obligated to review more than one game if there's a tie, in this particular month I was like, yeah, what the heck, I'll review that one too. And the original mobile games, how can I describe this? So I'm not sure if this is something that young people now would even know about, but it's something I was exposed to when I was younger, and that is, there are these little cheap, I think it might be more appropriate to call them toys, usually made of wood or plastic, with these metal BB spheres inside of them. And it's all gravity based, and the idea is you're tilting it different directions in order to try and get the balls into holes inside a maze or something. And there's a bunch of these types of games that have existed. I think it's like for like 100 years or more. I don't remember the exact number. It's in the review. But this style of game has existed well before any electronic video games or anything like that have. Thus the title, the original mobile games, because this is something you could hold in the palm of your hand, and it's a skill-based game where you try and tilt it back and forth. And I bring this up because that's what this game is. It's a simulation of those styles of games. And not just those styles of games, but the games that are included in this are actually historical recreations of the actual games, like some of the first ones that were ever made.
Oh.
Like, you can even see the old-timey advertisements on the back of them. I want to say there was like an advertisement for Sears or something like that on one. It's really interesting. And it's fascinating to kind of get this trip back through time to see the kind of games that maybe your grandparents played, or maybe your great-grandparents played when they were kids. As a historical piece, they are wonderful and fascinating, and there's all kinds of information about them. As an actual game, maybe not so much. I mean, they do a good job of replicating the motion-based, gravity controls where you are tilting the Joy-Con in order to tilt the balls into the holes and all of that.
Mm-hmm.
But you're talking about, I think there's something like 5 or 6 games included in this, and you can get more via DLC, but the 5 or 6 that are included in this collection, you could probably finish within 10 minutes easy. I want to say, I think Again, I'm pretty sure I included in the review, but from memory, I think I completed all of them within 7 or 8 minutes. And that's understandable. These were never games that were meant to take a particularly long time to complete. You were supposed to kind of try to beat your score, but after you complete each one of these games once, I'm not sure that you'll feel particularly compelled to go back to any of them again. It's a really interesting historical artifact, not so much a great video game.
All right. The next game was provided to you by the kind folks at Untitled Tales, and the game is called Flamekeeper.
Flamekeeper is a isometric action game and roguelike where you play as this anthropomorphic flaming coal who is fighting a bunch of enemies in the darkness, a bunch of like insects and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
With the purpose of you're getting flaming embers and bringing them back to your fire to try and liven up your fire. And in this game, you're getting that partly by, hitting trees. Fire literally does grow on trees in this game. It's a really cute world. It's got a really nice aesthetic. As for the action and roguelike elements, I feel like those didn't come across quite as well. The action is really repetitive and button mashy. And on top of that, this game uses a unique and interesting game system where in order to get past certain parts that you need to get past, you need to feed energy into it. You need to feed this flame energy into the fire, or you need to feed it into the thing that's holding a lantern. And then, anyway, the energy that you're feeding into it is the same energy that your life force consists of. So you're constantly having to balance those elements of your life force and the energy you're using as a resource. The problem with that is that this means that you're constantly grinding for that energy.
Ooh.
You'll go and you'll fill the campfire with this energy that you need to do to progress. And now it's like, okay, now I need to kill a bunch of stuff to get, my energy back. But also if you get hit, you lose that energy. So maybe you need to go and fight more critters. And everything respawns in this game. So it's like you're never left with this feeling like I've cleared this area out. I've mastered this part of the map or whatever. And this game has so many really interesting elements. Like every, I want to say, third or fourth level, you have a tower defense section where you're defending a fire from encroaching creatures now. And there are emplacements that you can feed your energy into that it will create a defensive barrier. But the problem is, again, the exact same thing. You're using up your energy. You need to go and refill your energy. So much grinding, so much... it just becomes tedious. And while there are roguelike elements here, or roguelite if you prefer, where you do have permanent upgrades that persist throughout the game as you progress. You can spend a resource to get them. But it feels like this progression is too slow, and the amount of variety you have access to is too limited. So, while this certainly isn't a bad game, I feel like it isn't really a great game either.
All right, so some housekeeping and news. Metroid Fusion is available for the Nintendo Switch Online Expansion Pack Game Boy Advance release.
And this is one that I would say is an important game in the series because it's the game that directly precedes Metroid Dread, and it's an important part of the story. But in my opinion, it is maybe the worst out of the mainline Metroid games. At the very least, it is the worst if we count Metroid Zero Mission in place of the original Metroid and Metroid Samus Returns in place of Metroid 2. Maybe that's not fair to Metroid Fusion, but that's how I look at it anyway. Still well worth playing, though. If you're a fan of Metroidvanias, this one is great. Definitely play it. Just don't expect it to be Super Metroid levels of awesome.
Alright, and then Nintendo Switch Online, Nintendo Entertainment System, Super Nintendo Entertainment System, and Game Boy releases for March 2023. There are a few. Xevious on NES, Side Pocket on SNES, and Kirby's Dream Land 2 And last, Burger Time Deluxe on Game Boy.
So I will say now, out of all of these games, really only the Game Boy games are the ones that are worth bothering with. The other two are Xevious is outdated and Side Pocket is just bad. Burger Time Deluxe is also outdated, but it has some kind of retro style, arcade style fun to be had there, I guess. I really would have rather had just the regular Burger Time, but okay. Really the one game that's the highlight here is Kirby's Dream Land 2. And it's a good platformer. At the same time, I feel like you already have two very much better Kirby games on Nintendo Switch Online in the form of Kirby's Adventure on the NES app and Kirby's Superstar on the SNES app. But having an additional really good platformer, not bad, certainly. And if you're a fan of the Kirby games, definitely play this one. It's worth playing.
All right. So, to talk about the big thing that you've been working on.
The big thing.
The big thing you've been working on for the past several months.
Several months. Last year.
Yeah.
Yeah, this has been a year in the making, and it is done now. It has to be done because it can't be done any further at this point.
So, what have you been working on, Jake?
Roughly a year ago, Nintendo announced that in March of 2023, they would be discontinuing the ability to purchase and download new games from the Nintendo 3DS and Wii U eShops. And in light of that announcement, I have spent the last year making it a point to try and play through as many games as possible on both of these platforms. And specifically, I've been aiming to play games that are not available on the Nintendo Switch. I feel like there were a lot of great games on these platforms, and many of these games are either going to be unavailable because they're entirely digital and now there's just no way to play them, or at the very least, they're going to be a great deal more expensive now because the digital version of the game is much less expensive than the physical cartridge version of the game. So even games where you could still technically get it, you probably won't be getting it because it's just so ridiculously expensive now. I think I ended up with, I want to say it was something like 84, I want to guess, I need to double check, but 84 games on the Wii U and 118 or so. I don't know. I'm making up numbers now. But basically, there's a lot of games on both of these platforms that you cannot play on Nintendo Switch. And starting, well, now, when you're listening to this, it will already be done. It'll already be over. These eShops will be closed, and these games will no longer be available to you. And I really do not mean to make this a rubbing it in your face kind of thing, but I've been trying to get people to pay attention to these games for the last year, and now it's done, it's over, you can't play them.
Okay, so let's start with your lists first before we talk about some of the things that you went through while, reviewing these games.
Okay.
There were a lot.
Oh, I think by the end, there were something like 650 Nintendo 3DS reviews, and I think there were over 100 Nintendo Wii U reviews, and that's not counting all the virtual console reviews. Yeah, it was a lot.
Okay, so we'll start with the best exclusives. Best exclusives or what?
So I have lists that I'd put here just in case you wanted to ask me about, what are my favorite games or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the lists that I have here is, so I have them sorted by Wii U and 3DS.
Okay.
So as far as the Wii U games that I think are the best games that are still only available on the Wii U, should I go from 10 to 1? Should I go in reverse order?
Yeah, go from 10 to 1, with 1 being the best.
Okay, so number 10, I have Xenoblade Chronicles X. And this is technically rated lower than some of the other exclusives, but I also feel like it's more unique than some of the other exclusives. Like, you have a Mario Tennis and Mario Golf game on the Nintendo Switch. Xenoblade Chronicles X is not like any of the other Xenoblade games. So, number 9 is Splatoon, the original.
Mm-hmm.
And while Splatoon 2 and Splatoon 3 definitely have very similar gameplay and have a lot of great stuff to offer, there's still a lot of really unique stuff in the original Splatoon. It has what I feel is still the best soundtrack in the series. It has a unique campaign mode. And the last time I checked, which granted was a few months ago, it still had an online presence on a Wii U game, out of all things.
Wow.
Number 8 is Nintendo Land. And this is a game that will never get ported to Nintendo Switch because this game was designed around the unique features of the Wii U. The asymmetrical play between the Wii U gamepad and the TV, the unique motion control stuff that was in the Wii U gamepad, the touchscreen in the gamepad. Nintendo Land just made use of so many different unique features of the Wii U that there's no way it will ever be done on any other game platform. I cannot imagine it could be. So that's always going to be on the Wii U and probably nothing else. And much the same can be said about the next game, Affordable Space Adventures. And this one, you're controlling this spacecraft that you can see on the screen, but you're controlling it using a control pad with all kinds of unique little fiddly controls on the touch screen. There's almost like a Star Trek-y kind of element to it where you're having to fiddle with the exact controls and deal with like the fuel consumption and the heat levels and radiation and you know how much sound are you putting out, that kind of thing. And I'm just going off of memory here, so some of that might not be 100% accurate, but I mean, it has all kinds of unique ways to control your ship and the way that it interacts with the environment. And it just would not be possible to replicate those controls on any other platform because it really depends on having a touch screen and 2 screens. And I mean, theoretically, you could do it on like a Nintendo DS or 3DS, but those are not going to exist anymore either. So,
oh well. Yeah. Number 6 is The Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess HD.
Now, this one we could get a port to Switch, and it's been rumored, but not announced, so who knows. This is clearly the best way to play The Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess, and it's not my favorite game in the Zelda series, but it's a very good one. And it has some unique and memorable characters. Midna is one of the most beloved characters in all Zelda games. And it has a really unique central mechanic in that Link turns into a wolf in parts of the game. And yeah, really good game. And a really good version of it that will no longer be existent. Well, unless you spend a lot of money to get the disc after this point.
Number 5, Sonic Lost World.
Sonic Lost World, it might also be on the PC. I'm not sure about this, but this game I feel like was Sega going, yeah, Super Mario Galaxy was really well liked. Let's do that with Sonic. And it's not nearly as good as Super Mario Galaxy, but it does a good job making use of that kind of gravity-defying element that Mario Galaxy had. And it's one of the better 3D Sonic games, I feel.
4, Pushmo World.
The entire Pushmo series is on the Nintendo 3DS and Wii U, which means that as of, you listening to this now, it is all completely unavailable because all of it was purely digital. You could only get it on the eShops. And they were all really, really good puzzle games, with the idea being it takes kind of that traditional Sokoban style puzzle where you're just pushing boxes around, but kind of does something different with it because it's you're pushing and pulling boxes and creating multiple levels to jump up on, and you need to think of the order that you're pulling them, and just really great core design with a ton of puzzles. And Pushmo World was unique in that you could design your own puzzles, and at least when the game still supported this feature, you could share them online, but that no longer exists. However, the core game is still really, really excellent. If you are a puzzle fan with a Wii U, you really hope that you got this game while you were still able to get it, because, man, you missed out if you didn't.
3, The Legend of Zelda The Wind Waker HD.
So this is, I feel, one of the better Zelda games. It's still not within, I feel, my top three, but it's getting pretty high up there, and it's within a lot of people's top three, I feel. Wind Waker was a game, when it came out on the GameCube originally, people didn't really appreciate the weird cartoony art style. And I feel like over time, it's been largely vindicated. People uh, think a lot more highly of this game now. In fact, I would say it has aged better than most of the older 3D Zelda games. It's got this really great personality to it, and it looks amazing on the Wii U. But on top of that, they actually improved the game on the Wii U because it had some annoying issues in the original release that they fixed in this version. There is an optional sail that you can get, or an optional thing that you can get that makes it easier to sail from place to place. There is a late game fetch quest that they made much easier to complete. This is absolutely, I would say, the best version of a great Zelda game. And while we can hope that they bring it to Nintendo Switch, we don't know that they ever will. And it'd be a shame if it didn't, because it is a amazing Zelda game.
Number 2, Yoshi's Woolly World.
I feel like this one didn't get the acclaim that it deserved when it came out. And it's a shame because I think the Yoshi series, for the longest time, has been chasing the greatness that was in the original Yoshi's Island on the Super Nintendo. And every installment since then has been underwhelming by comparison. But I feel like Yoshi's Woolly World is the game that came closest to hitting that greatness. It has this really great personality, great level design. It kind of feels similar to Kirby's Epic Yarn. I believe that a lot of people were reminded of that, but it still feels distinct enough from that, and it plays very differently. And it's just an all-around great platformer.
Number 1, Kirby and the Rainbow Curse.
This is one that is a sequel to one of my favorite games on the original Nintendo DS, which is Kirby Canvas Curse, where the idea was it was a Kirby platformer where you don't really directly control Kirby. You help Kirby along by drawing lines within the environment for him to roll along because he's been turned into a ball. This game does much the same thing, but now everything is rendered in this style that makes it look like it's been made out of clay. And it is a really gorgeous art design, really colorful, expressive game, and it still has the really excellent gameplay that the original did. And this is a game that I have difficulty seeing them being able to do on another platform because it relied so heavily on the touchscreen. Technically, the Nintendo Switch does have a touchscreen, but the games that Nintendo puts out now, they don't like the games that they release to rely on that touchscreen, and this game would have to rely on it. I do not see using a motion-controlled cursor or anything like that working anywhere near as well in this game. So my guess is this will probably be one of those games that forever stays on the Wii U, and that's a shame because it is a magnificent game.
All right. So let's briefly go over the worst games.
Okay. So again, we're still talking about the Wii U here. I tried not to include too many of these because I reviewed so many games, I was bound to get tons of trash.
Mm-hmm.
So starting from number 5, I guess. Did you want to read them off?
Yeah. Number 5 is Tap Tap Arcade 1 and 2.
These games are, each of them has a pair of games within them that are like simple arcade style games. And I'll just say now, they're all terrible. You have a bad Flappy Bird clone that's worse than Flappy Bird. You have terrible simple platformers where you can only control the jump button and you're just moving left and right as the environment raises. Moving on. It's just bad.
Number 4, Shadow Archery.
Shadow Archery is the sequel to Shadow Archer, but it takes a completely different form of gameplay where you are using either the touchscreen or you're using the Wii Remote's pointer to aim at enemies like a light gun game. It's a shooting gallery game. And there's nothing wrong with this in and of itself, The problem is that enemies in this game are damage sponges, and it takes so much effort to get rid of them. And it's like if you see enemies going toward your character, you're not going to be able to repel them before they get to you and do damage. And it just feels pointless.
3. Maze Break.
Low effort, terrible arcade style brick breaker. The physics are all kinds of wrong. Like your ball will curve in midair for no reason. It doesn't seem to depend on where on your paddle it hits. It's all based on the momentum you put into hitting the ball it's just I don't know why anyone would play this game. It is so terrible. Play one of the arcade style brick breakers that you can get on Virtual Console or something. I'm sure that there's one that I've forgotten about here. Or play one of the gazillion that you can play on any other platform. Do not play this game. It is awful.
2. All the Wii U Panorama View apps.
In theory, the Wii U Panorama View apps are not bad. In theory, they're an interesting way to make use of the unique mechanics that the Wii U has available to them. There are 4 of these apps, and each of them focuses on a different kind of event or scenario. One has you inside a carnival in Rio de Janeiro. One of them has you flying in a plane near a city. One of them has you taking a rickshaw tour with a geisha through Tokyo. And all of these are live action footage filmed in 360 degrees, where you can take your Wii U gamepad and hold it up and spin it around and look around you in 360 degrees. Kind of a cool idea. So problem number 1, YouTube already does this.
Yes.
They have 360 degree videos.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't need a special $300 console to do it. You can just watch it on your computer and just use the mouse to spin around the camera. Problem number 2, the video quality in these videos is horrible. Why would you have something that's showing off the feature of your system and you're specifically using it to show off video, and then you have the crappiest quality of video you could possibly have in the app? That is the one thing you needed to get right here. But then they actually charge money for these.
Mm-hmm.
These should be free. They're demos. They're tech demos. They're trying to sell you on the system. Why do you have to pay money for them? So, yeah, really, really awful. Don't buy any of them. Well, now you can't because you can't buy anything on the eShop, but be glad that you didn't. Or if you did buy them, I'm sure that you feel my pain. I bought all 4 of them to review them, and I feel dumber having done it. You're welcome, America. You're welcome.
Number 1, Animal Crossing Amiibo Festival.
I try not to judge a game for what it isn't. However, just to provide context, let it be known that there were no proper Animal Crossing games on the Wii U. That was a franchise that skipped the Wii U, with the exception of this game. Okay, again, not judging it based on that criteria. Animal Crossing Amiibo Festival is a Mario Party wannabe. Okay, great. Mario Party is a fun game. I mean, it's had its ups and downs, but it's fun. Jen, you've played Mario Party, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I know you have. I've played it with you.
Mm-hmm.
Picture a Mario Party game where there are no mini games.
Ew. The mini games are like half of the fun.
They're like all of the fun. Now, picture, in order to play this game, you need to use an amiibo figurine for each player who's playing the game.
Oh, that's horrible.
4 players, 4 amiibo figurines.
Mm.
Now, when this game was originally sold in stores, it came with 2 of them. It came with Isabelle and Digby, I think his name was.
Oh.
Yeah, that's where those amiibo figures come from, because I actually got the original version.
Okay.
But if you're getting the game used, you won't have them. You need to get the amiibos also. And that is if you have 2 players. If you want to play with a full 4, you need to buy additional amiibo figures. It gets better. they made amiibo cards for the Animal Crossing franchise. Cards that worked with the Happy Home Developer, or whatever it's called, game on the Nintendo 3DS. They're these little, like, baseball card style cards where they have a RFID chip in them that can be read as an amiibo. Okay, that's cool. Don't work with this game. They don't count as amiibos for this game. So this full price game, this game that they actually released that costs money to buy, requires you to buy additional amiibo figurines to use it to its full extent. And it doesn't have actual games in it. It's a Mario Party game where there's no party. And no Mario for that matter, but that's fine. The Animal Crossing characters are fine. It's cute. It's adorable. It's pointless. Oh, I hated this so much. Well, obviously, it's my number one worst game on the Wii U.
Okay, moving on to the best virtual console games.
Yes. So, specifically, these are virtual console games that have not yet made it onto the Nintendo Switch, and that, as far as we know, may never make it onto Nintendo Switch.
Number 10 is Trauma Team.
Trauma Team is, as of this recording, the final game in the Trauma Center series. And these were games that were on the Nintendo DS and the Wii. And it was kind of like an arcade-style simulation where you are a doctor in surgery. And while I know a lot of people, their experience with those types of games are like the surgery simulator games, which are horrible. And Trauma Center is not that. Trauma Center is actually extremely good. It's not super realistic, but the parts of it that you want to be realistic are. Like, you actually do get this feeling of, okay, I'm using the scalpel now, and I'm using the little tweezers to pull things apart and get in there, and okay, now I need to thread the needle and put that through to stitch the wound together. And this entry in the series adds a lot more variety because there are multiple characters that each have their own specialty and focus, which adds a variety of different gameplay styles to it. And there's this ridiculous story attached to all these characters. Like, one of the characters, you're introduced to him, and he's in a jail cell, and he's got this headgear on like he's Hannibal Lecter or something, and they're like, we need you to operate again. And it's ridiculously silly, but despite all of the excesses of the game, this is still a really great surgeon simulator. Much better than any of these surgeon simulator games.
Number 9, Advance Wars Duo Strike.
So we've just recently got the actual confirmation that Advance Wars 1+2 Reboot Camp is coming to Nintendo Switch, and it's going to be released within the next month, actually. However, Advance Wars Dual Strike is not going to be one of those games that's included. This is the game that was the first game in the series on the Nintendo DS, which introduced a lot of new elements, but the one that I feel was the biggest was simply having access to the touchscreen controls, where you could just tap where you wanted your units to go to on the touchscreen and they'd go there. And it made everything so effortless and streamlined. And that on top of the already great strategy gameplay, oh, this is a magnificent, excellent game.
8, Pikmin 2.
Pikmin 2, I know, is still the favorite of a lot of fans of the Pikmin series. And that's in part because they have some unique elements in this game, like there are caves that you can explore through, and there's a bit less of a time crunch in the game. Most of the Pikmin games have a time limitation that you need to stay within. On top of that, I feel like the Wii version of Pikmin and Pikmin 2, the Wii version of Pikmin 2 was much better than the Wii version of the first one because it has less of a graphical issue. There was some kind of issue with movement and the graphics in the first game that wasn't present in the second one. Just overall, really great game. Obviously now on the Switch we have Pikmin 3 and soon we'll be getting Pikmin 4, but the old ones are still well worth going back to, and Pikmin 2 in particular I think was excellent.
7, Punch-Out for the Wii.
I have to specify this is the Wii version of Punch-Out because it's just called Punch-Out. And of course, on the original Nintendo, we also had Punch-Out. The Wii version is like almost like an inspired remake of the original and Super Punch-Out in that it's still the same basic premise, but everything has been redone using modern 3D graphics. And by modern 3D graphics, I'm talking about everything is gorgeously animated. There's some of the best animation of any video game ever in this game. There could be dissertations on the quality of the animation in this game. It is so good. And the gameplay is excellent as well. This is one of my favorite, if not absolute favorite, boxing games of all time. Excellent game.
6. Kirby Nightmare in Dreamland.
Nightmare in Dreamland was originally released on the Game Boy Advance, and this is a remake of Kirby's Adventure. That was originally released on the NES, and is still to this day one of the best Kirby games. And Nightmare in Dreamland improves on it with really good graphics. It has a limited screen size because it was released on the Game Boy Advance, so I'm not sure if I would go as far as to say it's better than Kirby's Adventure, but I feel like it's about on par. It's still very, very good.
5. Metroid Zero Mission.
I was just talking about this one earlier. This one is a remake of sorts, or a reimagining, I guess would be a better way to put it, of the original Metroid game, but it redesigns it in a style that's closer to Super Metroid. And I feel like more than any other game in the Metroid series, this is the one that comes the closest to reaching that apex that was Super Metroid. Super Metroid is still the best game in the original, the 2D Metroid series, but Metroid Zero Mission comes darn close.
4. Super Mario Galaxy 2.
The original Super Mario Galaxy is playable on Nintendo Switch via the Super Mario 3D All-Stars collection, which I think you can still find in some stores, or at least online stores. But Galaxy 2 wasn't included in that collection for some reason. And it's a shame because it was more of the same of Super Mario Galaxy, but when you're talking about one of the greatest video games ever made, more of the same of that is pretty darn good. This is one of the best 3D platformers ever made. If you like Mario games at all, this is a must-have.
3. Kirby Canvas Curse.
I was talking about Kirby Canvas Curse earlier too. Again, it's all about drawing lines on the screen to direct Kirby where to go. And beautiful game, really colorful, imaginative graphics, and great original touchscreen-based gameplay.
2. Super Mario RPG.
It is crazy that this game is not on Nintendo Switch yet. It is Mario's first RPG, and it's so filled with personality. It has such great characters. It has some really fun, unique gameplay. The only reason I can think that it wouldn't be on Nintendo Switch yet is that this was a co-effort by both Nintendo and Squaresoft, who later became Square Enix. And so Squaresoft, or Square Enix now, may retain some rights to it, but I think it's well worth seeking out those rights because this is one of the best RPGs on the Super Nintendo. And the Super Nintendo was an RPG machine. So for this game not to be on the Switch is an amazingly horrible oversight. But you can still get it, well, you could still get it up until the eShops died on the Wii U.
1. Metroid Prime Trilogy.
Recently on Nintendo Switch, we got a magnificent remake of the original Metroid Prime. I think this will probably sound familiar to you, Jen, because it was my game of the month, I think, just last month.
I think so, yeah.
Metroid Prime Trilogy includes the original Metroid Prime, or at least the Wii version of the original, as well as its 2 sequels. And for $20, this was a shocking bargain. Nintendo never has deals this good. And in its original release on the Wii, it was released in such small quantities that it became very hard to find and it became an extremely expensive collector's item. And then they made it freely available on the Wii U eShop. Again, only $20. And at that price, for 3 amazing first-person shooter kind of Metroidvania-style games, it's an absolute must-buy for the platform. Except now you can't buy it, so now you're stuck going back to eBay and trying to get the original Wii game, which heaven only knows what that's selling for now. But I dread to even look, but I would guess that it's probably super expensive.
All right, now we're going to talk about the Nintendo 3DS games.
Man, there were a lot of those.
I have very fond memories of the Nintendo 3DS.
Really? I didn't know that
yeah.
you even played it.
I have a few games on it. I think I have very fond memories of it because it was when I finally grew into an adult and had my own income.
Okay.
So I could actually buy the games I wanted instead of going, "Hey mom, dad, I want this game." So anyway.
Well, no, now I gotta know. So what games do you have the fondest memories of?
Oh my gosh. The Pokemon games for sure. And it's really hard because some of it's blurring with the Game Boy Advance games and the Game Boy Color.
That's fair.
A lot of there was a drawing game that I got from a friend. There was
Yeah, there were a few of those.
Oh gosh, why am I blanking on them?
Well, maybe I'll name a few.
Yeah.
Okay, so just so you're aware, because I didn't want to have to choose when there's a franchise that has multiple entries here, I just listed all of them. So technically, there's probably about 20 games in this top 10 list, but just bear with me.
All right, so number 10, Dragon Quest VIII Journey of the Cursed King.
Both Dragon Quest VII, which originally released on the PlayStation, and Dragon Quest VIII, which originally released on the PlayStation 2, got kind of ports or remakes onto the Nintendo 3DS. However, I didn't think too fondly of Dragon Quest VII. Dragon Quest VIII, on the other hand, was magnificent. Really, really funny story, great characters, excellent visuals for the 3DS. You could see a lot of the stylistic choices that were being made here that would go on to make for an even bigger, better game in Dragon Quest XI, which would eventually hit the Nintendo Switch. But Dragon Quest VIII features a completely different, unique story and characters, and it is an excellent old school RPG with modern sensibilities and presentation.
9. Donkey Kong Country Returns 3D.
This was originally released on the Wii and then ported to Nintendo 3DS. And while each version has their strengths and weaknesses, the Wii version looks better. The 3DS version doesn't have any of the Wii motion control hijinks. And between the two of them, I think I prefer the 3DS version. This is an incredible platformer. It is a great tribute to the classic Donkey Kong Country trilogy. And I think as far as platformers go, it's really only been topped by its sequel on the Nintendo Wii U and the Nintendo Switch, Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze. But Donkey Kong Country Returns, still excellent, excellent platformer.
Number 8, Metroid Samus Returns.
This, as I mentioned earlier, is a remake of the second game in the Metroid series, and it is an incredible remake. This is done by the same folks who went on to develop Metroid Dread. So that tells you how good a job they did, that Nintendo was like, wow, you did such a good job with that remake. Now we want you to make the next game in the series. And you have a lot of the same elements there being featured here for the first time. Really, really great Metroidvania style game.
7. Mario and Luigi series, which includes Mario and Luigi Bowser's Inside Story, plus Bowser Jr.'s Journey, Mario and Luigi Dream Team, Mario and Luigi Superstar Saga, plus Bowser's Minions, and Mario and Luigi Paper Jam.
Yeah, it's a lot, I know. Here's the thing. The Mario and Luigi series is made by a developer, Alpha Dream, who unfortunately had to shutter their doors. They've gone out of business. And it's a big question whether or not we will ever see another Mario and Luigi RPG, which is a real shame because these are incredibly good, highly accessible RPGs. In fact, I would argue while the Paper Mario series has diverged more and more from the RPG formula to become these really weird experimental games that a lot of people find unsatisfying, I feel like the Mario and Luigi games have stayed true to the course and really have consistently been excellent, which makes it all the more sad that we might not ever see them again. And so many great ones released on the Nintendo 3DS. It's hard to pick a favorite out of all of these, although a lot of people point to Bowser's Inside Story as one of the best games in the entire series. So I think between either that and Dream Team, but really all of these games are excellent.
6. Radiant Historia Perfect Chronology.
Radiant Historia was originally released on Nintendo DS, and it just got a remake on the 3DS that added in a few more features, but it really didn't need much because the original game was already so excellent. It has just beautiful music, really interesting story, really clever combat system for an RPG. And the 3DS version adds full voice acting for the game, which really helps too. This was one of my bigger surprises on the Nintendo 3DS. I had never played Radiant Historia either version, and so I didn't have any expectations when I played this, and I was blown away by how good an RPG it is.
5. The Legend of Zelda A Link Between Worlds.
This is a completely original Zelda game, but it is clearly directly based on the Super Nintendo game Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past. It uses a map that's very similar to the map that was in that game, but it kind of reimagines it in a way where you can take on a lot of the world's challenges in whatever order you want, instead of earning the big sub weapons in the dungeons. Now you rent them out from a central location, and you can get as many as you want. But the more you get, the more you risk losing them if you end up dying. It's kind of a weird experimental system, but it's interesting and it makes for an interesting game. And that's on top of the game's central mechanic of you're playing a version of Link who can turn himself 2D so that he can walk on walls, which makes for some really clever puzzle design.
4. The Fire Emblem series, such as Fire Emblem Awakening, Fire Emblem Fates, such as Birthright and Conquest, Fire Emblem Echoes, Shadows of Valentia.
The Fire Emblem series, as I understand it, was kind of starting to decline prior to this, and then Fire Emblem Awakening apparently reinvigorated the series. If it was not for Fire Emblem Awakening, we might never have gotten Fire Emblem Three Houses on the Nintendo Switch. And that'd be a real shame because Fire Emblem Three Houses is amazing. But Awakening is also very good. It doesn't have a lot of those kind of relationship building elements that Three Houses has. It doesn't have the school simulation or anything like that. What it has, and what all of these games that have just been mentioned have, is really great strategy RPG gameplay. Excellent series.
3. The Pokemon Mainline series, Pokemon Sun and Moon, and Pokemon X and Y.
Pokemon Sun and Moon also technically includes Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon, but Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon were kind of just remakes, sort of, kind of
with a little bit of new things.
Yeah, they added some extra stuff, but it was mostly the same game. All of the Pokemon games on the 3DS were incredible. All the mainline games, I should specify, which runs counter to our experience on Nintendo Switch, with Pokemon Sword and Shield being a huge disappointment, and Pokemon Scarlet and Violet having some really good qualities, but some really bad ones too.
Mm-hmm.
But with Sun and Moon and X and Y, all of these games, it was just really, really great gameplay, a really interesting world to explore, a lot of really great personality in Sun and Moon, and just overall, I feel like this may have been the apex of the Pokemon series up to this point. There's an argument to be made that Pokemon Silver and Gold were kind of an apex in and of itself. And everyone has their favorite Pokemon games, I'm sure.
Mm-hmm.
I'm kind of partial to the original Red and Blue myself. But I feel like they were really on fire on the Nintendo 3DS era, and it's kind of sad to see them not quite reaching those same heights on the Nintendo Switch, at least not so far.
2. Etrian Odyssey series.
Again, lumping all of these together, and I'm not including Etrian Mystery Dungeon, which I feel like is more of a Mystery Dungeon game than an Etrian Odyssey game. Etrian Odyssey 4, 5, Untold, Untold 2, and Nexus. So, quite a lot of games. These are all first person dungeon crawlers and turn based RPGs. And they all have this really great central mechanic, which is you are a cartographer. You are literally drawing maps of the dungeons as you're exploring them, and you're drawing them onto the screen of your Nintendo 3DS. And it's really well done. It makes for some really, really great immersive gameplay. And each of the installments that I've just named kind of has their own unique positive qualities to offer. Like, I really like that Etrian Odyssey 4 has an overworld map, and that's not something they revisit in the later games. Where Etrian Odyssey 5, for example, has a really great selection of different abilities to choose from. Overall, amazing RPG series, and I'm looking forward to seeing the games, the first 3 games in the series, remade on the Nintendo Switch. But until then, all of these games on Nintendo 3DS are still, I love them so much.
1. The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time 3D.
I kind of mulled over this one because it seems weird to name as my number one favorite for the Nintendo 3DS, a game that had hundreds of great games, to name as my favorite a remake of a game from a previous system. But when I think about it, number 1, Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time 3D is an extensive remake. They didn't just up-res the visuals, they remade a lot of the graphics and even some of the game systems behind the game to make it more modernized. But on top of that, we are talking about a game that many point to as one of the greatest games of all time. And this is the best version of one of the greatest games of all time. How can I not point to this one as the best game on the Nintendo 3DS? It is the best version of one of the greatest games of all time.
Best digital only games not on modern platforms.
So I wanted to highlight also that there are a lot of really great Nintendo 3DS games that you just would not be able to get on any modern consoles. And I can just name a bunch of these. We don't need to go through details. And they're both games that were released on 3DS and also backward compatibility with the DSiWare.
Well, I can go through them really quickly.
Okay.
10. WarioWare Gold. Number 9. Rhythm Heaven Megamix. Number 8. Crimson Shroud. 7. Gotta Protectors. 6. Chicken Wiggle. 5. Picross 3D Round 2. 4. Phoenix Wright Series Dual Destinies Apollo Justice and Spirit of Justice. 3. Rage of the Gladiator. 2. Siesta Fiesta. And 1. Pushmo series, including Pushmo, Crashmo, and Stretchmo.
We also got to mention the DSiWare games because there are a lot of great games in there too. So you want to run through the top 10 list I have for those?
10. Surfacer Plus. 9. Castle of Magic. 8. Mighty Milky Way. 7. Aura Aura Climber. 6. Starship Defense. 5. GG Series Energy Chain. 4. Face Pilot Fly with Your Nintendo DSi Camera. 3. Pinball Pulse The Ancients Beckon. 2. Number Battle. 1. AI Race.
Again, a lot of great stuff in there. A lot of games I'm sure that a lot of people just skipped over and not realizing that these really inexpensive games were really, really fantastic. And it's kind of sad to me that a lot of these games people will never play.
All right, and then we'll go over to the best virtual console games not on the Nintendo Switch.
And thankfully, the Nintendo Switch just recently added Game Boy games to their virtual console, so A good number of these we may end up seeing coming to the Nintendo Switch, but so far, no. So
10. Quarth. 9. Super Mario Land. 8. Gargoyle's Quest to the Demon Darkness. 7. Quicks. 6. The Legend of the Mystical Ninja. 5. Wario Land Super Mario Land 3. 4. Mario Golf in Game Boy Color. 3. Kirby's Pinball Land. 2. Mole Mania. 1. Donkey Kong for the Game Boy.
before we move on to the ending of this, I feel like we should take a moment to talk about digital games in general.
Oh, why's that?
Well, we just saw the closing of a digital storefront, and we're talking about a lot of games that are no longer available. And I feel like that is a pretty serious topic of discussion for video games as a whole. People talk almost dismissively, it seems, about the topic of video game preservation. This idea that we want to be able to access all of these video games from throughout history and learn from them, refer back to them. And of course, if you're a company like Nintendo, you want to be able to draw from them for nostalgia purposes to get people to say, hey, you remember this old Mario game you liked? Well, check out this new Mario game. You want to buy this because you liked that. And to see game companies like Nintendo allowing their old digital shops to just fall by the wayside kind of says that they don't really have any great respect for those classic titles any more than they can use them as a selling point. It also kind of raises the topic of any time one of these digital storefronts closes, it empowers, it strengthens the argument for piracy. Because if there is no way to get a genuine copy of these games anymore, why wouldn't you pirate them if you want to play them?
I mean, that's very fair. Not to say that you guys should, do that, but I mean,
I'm not giving anyone permission to pirate them, but I certainly do not judge anyone for pirating. I'm not commanding anyone to pirate, but if you decide that you're hearing some of these games, which many of these are no longer available, all of the DSiWare games I mentioned, no longer available. A lot of the digital games that are on these shops, like in the Wii U list, I mentioned Affordable Space Adventures, no longer available in any form. In the 3DS list, I named Gotta Protectors as one of my top 10. This is just off the top of my head. No longer available. And if you're curious about these games, if you want to play them, you have no other option. You could theoretically track down someone who downloaded them before the shops went offline. But really, realistically, your only option is to pirate if you want to play these. I'm sure that Nintendo would just rather you play something new instead. Don't bother playing those old games. But I tend to be of the belief that old games still have value. Some of them are dated, sure, but some of them are still really good even today.
I mean, people still play Pong, people still play Tetris.
Yeah. And so it's really sad to see these digital storefronts closing. It's really worrisome, especially because my subreddit and this YouTube channel are called eShopper Reviews. I have specifically named this after the digital storefront on the Nintendo 3DS, the Wii U, and the Nintendo Switch. And I'm not specifically saying that I think that people should get the digital versions of games, but I do think that there are a lot of advantages to digital versions of games. It's nice to not have to look for your cartridge to pop into your system, to just be able to pull it up on a menu in your game system and play it. That is wonderful. I love that convenience. But what we are looking at now is the dark side to that. We are looking at the scarcity that's created by this. The fact that anything that's released only on a digital platform has an impermanence unlike anything you see in the physical world. That's worrisome. It kind of leads me to worry about the future of the Nintendo Switch. Granted, Yeah, the Nintendo 3DS and Wii U came out over a decade ago. But how long ago did the Nintendo Switch come out? It came out in 2017. That's 6 years ago. So does that mean another 5 years that all of the library on the Nintendo Switch is going to go kaput too? I've reviewed over 2,000 games on Nintendo Switch, and much like the 3DS and Wii U, a lot of those games are digital only. And a lot of them are truly amazing games, games that you can't get anywhere else. And it truly saddens me to think that there will come a day when those will be locked off and future generations will have no access to them, except through illegal channels like piracy. I don't know that there's a good solution here, but I feel like it's something we need to take notice of, recognize, and maybe start looking for alternatives.
Well, that wraps things up for this month's eShopper Reviews podcast.
On that positive note, huh?
Well, at least you played a lot of good and not so good games.
I played a lot of good games and a lot of bad games, yeah.
Again, we want to thank all of our patrons on Patreon for contributing. Patreon donors are the first ones to gain access to these podcasts, and if you are interested in becoming a donor, please check out our Patreon page at patreon.com/eShopperReviews. And once again, if you're curious to read any of the reviews or content mentioned in this podcast, you can find it on the eShopper Reviews subreddit at reddit.com/r/eShopperReviews. Once again, this has been Jenn Ip
and Jake McNeil.
We'll see you next month, and in the meantime, we both hope you found this content helpful and enjoyed some new games. Catch you on next time.
Later.